Welcome or welcome back to my channel. My name is Tatenda and I love everything related to writing, reading, and anything creative. Welcome to my channel where I will be not only teaching about how to be a better writer, but also learning myself how to become a better writer. Do you remember the books that you read as a child? Do you remember exactly the stories that you read? What was memorable about them? What did you like about the stories? For me, whenever I think about the books that I read as a child, there's one book that always stood out to me. One book that I could recite even as an adult. This book is called The Emperor's New Clothes. It is a folklore, a fairy tale. It got me thinking about how can we become better writers? How can we become better writers? Most importantly, also, how can we write really good, memorable short stories? I will be reading parts of the book. I'm not reading the entire book, but I'll be reading certain parts of the book, and then I will be showing you how and then I'll explain the point. I hope that makes sense, because, yeah. Anyway, so these are the 4 key elements that I believe make a memorable short story: a strong start, compelling characters, a conflict, and an impactful ending. So let's jump right into it. Okay. So I'm looking down because I have the book here, so I'll be reading and then we'll go through the book together. And then I have my notes on my phone, so I'll also be like going back and forth with the book and my phone. Okay. Many years ago, there lived an emperor who adored fashionable clothing and dressing stylishly. He spent all his money on clothes made of the finest fabrics and most sophisticated designs. He didn't care for royal responsibilities and took no interest in governing. In fact, the emperor never went out in public unless it was to make an appearance to show off the latest addition to his ever-expanding wardrobe. Now, this brings me to my first point, which is a strong start. When you're writing a short story, you don't have a lot of time to get into a lot of details. You don't have a lot of time to give a lot of backstory. So every sentence and every word counts. It matters. It has to move the story forward. And so if you read the first sentence, we're introduced to an emperor about how he adored fashionable clothing and dressing stylishly. Those and how he spends all his money on clothes are made of the finest fabrics. And so going into the story, as you can see how the story starts, the author starts out strong, introduces us to the emperor. We don't even know the emperor's name. We don't even know how he got into this position. We don't know anything else apart from what he specifically stated. And so the beginning of this story, it creates intrigue for the reader, and the reader will continue reading the story. Something also that I should also mention is that you should not worry about having the perfect introduction to your story when you're beginning to write your story, because you can always come back to it and rewrite it once you have a clearer picture of how the whole story is going to turn out. And so think about how you can capture the reader's attention, how you can get straight to the point, and how you can provide valuable information that will push the story forward. Going into the next point, let's read. Okay. The emperor had an outfit for every hour of the day, should he choose to change that often. One day, 2 swindlers arrived, claiming to be magnificent weavers, but it was their most unusual claim to fame that caught the emperor's attention. The clothes made from their fabrics had the remarkable ability of being invisible to anyone simple-minded or who was not suited to their job. And that brings me to point number 2, which is you need compelling characters that push the story forward. Already with the introduction, we are introduced to one of the characters. Actually, the emperor is the main character. So we're introduced to this character, and then we're also introduced to 2 new characters, the swindlers that are coming into the story. Yeah. Short stories usually contain 1 or 2 main characters, and so you don't have a lot of room to put too many characters. And if you're adding any character, you want to make sure that the character is relevant to the story. So in this book, we have the emperor, the 2 swindlers, and then we have some officials. They have smaller parts in the story, but they do push the story forward. And then we also have a little child at the end of the story who's actually a big part of the story, but they're not mentioned. The child is not mentioned until the very end. And so you have to think strategically about how you're introducing characters and how you're creating your characters that are moving the story forward. The important thing is, I think when you're starting out, I think you should just focus on one main character, just because you want the people to care. You want your reader to care about the character you're writing about. You want them to care about the protagonist, because a reader who does not care about the character will probably not finish reading, and they won't continue reading the book. So think about how you can make the character relatable to some level. With the emperor, I think when I think about like his weakness, so he is someone who's in position of power, he has all this money, and he spends it on clothes, and he wants to look stylish. And when I think about it as a reader, I can relate to it in some level, because who doesn't want to look stylish? Who doesn't? Okay, I'm not gonna speak for everybody, but and also now that I'm an adult, when I think about the story again, I think about, okay, maybe the stylish clothing, as him liking stylish clothing, is actually a metaphor for something else. Like, we all have our vices or our flaws, some things that we that we are obsessed with. And so in this case, the emperor is obsessed with clothing. And when I also think about it, the more I think about the story, I just think about how, to me, just so like absurd. Like, how can an emperor be obsessed with clothing? I don't know. It's just funny to me. And so the power of the story, I think, is like just how it kind of gets you to like ask questions, and it gets you curious, and you want to learn more about this character. And then when the swindlers come in other versions, they actually say that they use the word con man. So they don't use the word swindlers, they use the word con man. And so his con man, and they claim that they're able to make clothing that is only visible to people who are smart, or like people who are fit for their job. What a wild claim, and it's obviously a con, and we want to know, okay, does the emperor fall for it? Which he does. And as you read the story, you become intrigued, and you want to like know what's happening next. And then I'm going on to the next point, a clear conflict. So at this point, before I read this one, so the emperor hires these swindlers to make the clothing, and he pays them handsomely, gives them all the gold, all the money that they ask. And so they're making his clothes. And while they're making the clothes, the emperor is curious to see how the work is coming along. And so he sends two officials, one after the other, and the con men are not making anything, but they're pretending to be working. And so when the officials get to the con men, like they get to where the con men are working, and they're assessing to see how the work is coming along, they pretend to see the clothing, and the con men are like, oh, don't you think this is beautiful? Don't you think this is wonderful? And because they think to themselves, oh, I don't want people to think that I'm not fit for my job, I don't want to lose my job, they pretend, and they say, yes, we can see it, and then they go and report back to the emperor. And so by the time the emperor, so this is the part I'm going to read, is when the emperor is now with the con man, and he's looking at the looms, and he can literally see nothing. And this is the part, okay. The emperor stood before the looms in silent horror, for he saw nothing. But there was no way that he was going to make this confession. He praised the swindlers for their hard work and superb design, and agreed to wear the new clothes in the upcoming grand parade. The emperor looked at himself in the mirror and pretended that he was pleased with his fine new outfit. And so this is actually the day of the parade. And he puts on this clothes, and he's acting like he's happy. And so without conflict, there is no story. There are two main categories of conflict. There is internal and external. Internal conflict is the one that the character has within himself. For example, with the two officials who first go to look at the work that the con men are doing, they both can clearly see there's nothing on the looms. But because of the claim that the con men had made, that if you cannot see this clothing, then it means you are not smart, it means you are not fit for your job. They have an internal struggle, and they decide to pretend that they can actually see the clothing. And then by the time, because of the reports that the officials have given to the emperor, by the time he comes along, he clearly cannot see anything, but he's the emperor here. He cannot be seen. He thinks to himself, he has an internal conflict. He thinks to himself, there's no ways that I'm going to let other people think that I'm not fit for my job. And so that's where the conflict shows. So internal conflict is when a character struggles within themselves because of their own opposing beliefs or desires. On top of the internal conflict, there's also an external conflict, which would be a person versus society. So this is versus what the conmen are claiming, the clothing is there. The importance of a clear conflict is that it also creates tension. So it keeps the reader wants to keep going, the reader wants to keep reading, and it pushes the story forward. So when you think about your short story, think about the type of tension that you want to create, the type of conflict, that you want to create. I think the best type of conflict are ones that are multi-layered, where it's an internal conflict as well as an outside and an external conflict. Okay, and then going on to the last point, which is an impactful ending. So now the emperor has put on his clothes and he's marching in the parade. And this is what happens. The emperor marched along in the parade, and everyone watching pretended that these new clothes were his finest yet. No one dared admit that they couldn't see his new outfit. That would mean that they weren't smart or that they were unfit for their jobs. Suddenly, and this is my favorite part, suddenly the voice of a small child rang out, "But he isn't wearing anything." It wasn't long before the child's remark spread throughout the crowd. The emperor cringed. He decided that there was nothing left to do but to continue along. In this version, the emperor continues on with the parade because he just, he's like, I'm already outside, I'm already in the parade, might as well finish it. In the version that I read when I was growing up as a child, the emperor actually runs away once everyone confirms that, hey, the emperor is actually not wearing anything. When you're writing your ending, you need to think about how to tie the story back together. If you're not doing a part 2 or a part 3, I think it's important not to leave the story with a huge cliffhanger. Ideally, I think with short stories, you just don't leave any cliffhangers, because you want the reader to feel satisfied. They've been reading your story and they've come along this journey with you, and you want them to feel like this story was worth reading and that the ending was satisfactory. So when have your ending in place, when you're clear about the type of ending you're thinking about, then you can also even go back to the start of the story and fix the beginning if you need to. But yeah, I think an ending is really important. I think the ending of the story kind of explains itself. The effort that you put in writing your story, put that same effort in how you end the story. I think sometimes when you're writing, because I've done it, I'm so guilty of it, whereby I'm writing a short story, and honestly, I don't care what anyone says, but short stories are so difficult to write. You don't, they're just, to me, they're just so difficult. A longer story, to me, is easier to write than a short story. And so sometimes when you've been writing something, maybe you've been writing for weeks or days, however long you've been writing the short story, you might be tempted to just slap on, an easy ending, or an ending that is, I don't know, you just wanted to get it over and done with. But don't do that, because especially if you're an upcoming author, or if you're an upcoming writer, if you're in the beginning stages of your writing, I think you should put in more effort into how you end the story, because I think it can also affect how the reader is going to approach your next stories, like whether or not they'll want to keep reading your books and your other work and stuff. This is not to scare you, but it's more so just to kind of encourage you that, you know what, you can, if you've put an effort to write a whole story, you can have a good ending. And then I also do want to add a disclaimer as well, because this story is folklore. So it's a story that has been passed down from generation to generation. As I was doing my research, I found out some interesting facts about the story that I also would like to share. The story was published in 1837 by Hans Christian Andersen, I believe, as part of a children's collection of stories. And then as I was doing more research, I found that the original story is actually based on a Spanish tale from 1335. 1335, okay? So this story has been retold and rewritten for over 690 years. All this to say that writing well takes time. Just keep on writing, even if you feel like you're not writing, or even also if you feel like your ending is not that great, maybe get some feedback, write. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video. I hope you have found it useful and informational. If you have any more tips that you would like to add on how to write a memorable short story, please comment down below, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye. So how this is going to work is I will be reading excerpts. Is it called excerpt? I don't think I know how to pronounce that word. Okay. Let me go to my headphones. Excerpt. Also, if you have a children's book that you read when you were younger and that you're fond of. Also, if you have a children's book that you read when you were younger and that you're fond of, you can also share it in the book and the note. You can also share it in the comment section. Let's run it back. Okay. Let's do this. Okay, I can do this. Okay. Thank you so much for. If you've gotten to the end of this video, thank you for watching, and I hope you found this useful. If you have any tips as well on how to write a memorable short story, please comment down in the comment section below. If you have oh my goodness, I'm at the end. I can do this. Okay, focus, okay. You can also share it in the book and the note. You can also share it in the comment section. Let's run it back. Okay. Thank you so much for. If you've gotten to the end of this video, thank you for watching, and I hope you found this useful. If you have any tips as well on how to write a memorable short story, please comment down in the comment section below. If you have oh my goodness, I'm at the end. I can do this. Okay, focus. Okay.